room is full of nerds because we're about to get technical. In any case, can you see my slides? They're up somewhere? Yes, awesome. So the plan of the attack for today is, I will show you a couple of aspirational slides. Žygimantas will show you a couple of data-full slides, and then we'll discuss the data in the slides. And basically what we're trying to do is to talk to you about what DeepTech is, what it means for the Baltics, and where it could go. So first, let me tell you a couple of words about Baltic Sandbox Ventures, because last time this year, or last year this time at Startup Fair, Baltic Sandbox Ventures was not a thing. So we're a new fund, and funny story, I actually had a conversation with Sandra a year ago on the stairs of Kablis, and that's how I became a venture partner at the fund. So for all the hustlers out there who are trying to make this conference matter, you go, everything is possible. So one question we get a lot is, how deep is your tech? What is deep tech, and what do you do with it? So our definition is, it's a science and engineering-led products with an IP edge, intellectual property. So you have to have some sort of edge in terms of technological moat that you can protect or hide from other competitors. And this is closely connected to emerging and disruptive tech, EDT, that NATO speaks about, high-tech, advanced tech that other investors use, and sometimes even dual-use, dual-purpose technologies. The way to explain it to your grandmother is by drawing on a napkin a matrix and putting good, bad, easy, hard, and tell your grandma to imagine she's playing a game. So if you're playing a good and easy game, your grandma will probably want to design a software for one of her friends to take her cart out or get her shopping done on a Sunday. That's a good and an easy quest. If she decides to create another last mile delivery app, it's an easy quest, but probably a bad one, because we have a couple of those. They're working okay. And if your grandma decides to invade her neighbor, like some of the geopolitical actors in the region, that's a complex quest, but a bad quest. And so the people here on this panel are focusing on this area right here, and I put a nice shiny star in it. We're focusing on deep tech, life sciences, dual use, space tech, complex AI, anything you want to put in it. And so as Baltic Sandbox Ventures, we help founders go on good but hard, complicated quests. And over the past half a year, we've incubated 52 teams. We've made 11 investments, and we've committed close to 1 million in investments and grants, 965K in pre-seed investments, and slightly close to 100K in grants. And so because I have the stage and I have to annoy you, I'd like to shout out Vytis from VSky, who a night ago received signatures from Co-Invest Capital, Baltic Sandbox Ventures, and a bunch of angels, and we closed for our fund one of the bigger, and for Co-Invest one of the first under the new leadership, Victoria Trimble, round 1.1 million for aviation, software, and hardware. So I'm just using the case of VSky to highlight that deep tech's hot. Dual use, a particular area within deep tech, had zero funding at the beginning of 21 when some geopolitical events happened in the neighborhood. Today, we have 55 million from Baltic Sandbox Ventures, Co-Invest Capital, Scale Wolf. Our colleagues at Iron Wolf Capital are raising a new 70 million fund and deployed very successfully the first fund. Colleagues from Open Circle, Practica, Contrarian Ventures all have deep techy sort of edges. If we do back of the napkin math, if we add all those funds up, right, which will probably never happen because most of this capital is going away and stuff, but if we add it all up, we get up to 325 million of extra financing for deep tech in the region. And so what I want to have a debate about today is what can we do to achieve the impossible and unlock a 400 million opportunity for the deep tech in the Baltics over the next 10 years. With this, I hand over to more data-driven approach by Žygimantas, and a couple of intro words, and then we'll switch to the panel.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Žygimantas. I am a partner at Iron Wolf, VC fund that is focusing on AI and deep tech. And before we would start the discussion, I would like, to use a couple of statistical charts, right, that they have been taken from deal room report. And by the way, for those who don't know, together with deal room, we have launched the survey, the report of the Baltic DeepTech and AI market. And this report will be going to be renewed on an annual basis. And you could find this report and download it on dealroom.co website.
On the Dealroom platform, which is free and available for our users to use.
All right, so a couple of charts where, first of all, Europe stands in the world in deep tech. So in the recent years, deep tech has emerged as one of the most important investment themes in Europe. In 2022, it reached total funding in deep tech reached 22 billion. That accounted for one-fifth of the total VC investments in Europe. So that's big achievement. But still, Europe significantly still lags behind the US. In a period from 2020 to 2022, VC investments in the US in deep tech were almost 170 billion. In Europe, only 50 billion, which is 3 times less. So Europe still has, to go a long way to catch up with America. And I think positive side that Dealroom together with Atomico, they made a survey of what are the most favorable themes for investment for European LPs. And what's interesting that deep tech emerged as the second most interesting theme, behind only Planet Positive. So, okay, so now let's come back to the Baltics.
Would you like me to take this slide?
Yeah, please.
Sure. So on the slide behind us, we have the combined enterprise value of the Baltics ecosystem split into 3 different categories. In the dark blue, we have the deep tech startups within the Baltics, and the lighter blue represents AI-enabled or AI-powered Baltic startups. And basically, the trend we're showing is between 2018 and modern day, we're seeing like a rapid growth in the amount of the valuation of all of the startups in deep tech is taking up a larger percentage of that within the Baltics. So yeah, that's the main finding from this slide here. Okay.
Sure.
In this slide here, we have the amount of VC investment that's going into those 3 categories. Again, deep tech startups are in either headquarters in the Baltics or have been founded in the Baltics and have since moved on to other countries. So again, a similar trend as we saw in the previous slide in terms of over the last few years, there has been an increase in the proportion of investment going into deep tech startups, into AI-enabled startups due to their popularity. The Baltics as a region being very favorable and attractive place for investors to invest into these technologies and startups. And this is the key takeaway for this slide here. For this slide here, we wanted to showcase a few of the largest rounds and selected rounds across a few different categories. Working left to right, we have the selected top rounds in the last couple of years within the Baltics with familiar names such as Nord Security, Verif, Bolt, etc. We have selected deep tech rounds in the center, as well as AI-enabled and AI-powered startups in the middle. So what we're able to sort of showcase is a couple of examples for each of those categories of what we mean by deep tech and what we mean by AI-enabled. Just as a startup will use AI technologies or is AI-enabled doesn't necessarily make it a deep tech company or a cutting edge in what it's aiming to do. So yeah, this is the proportions there that we're able to showcase, as well as always ever present and popular impact and climate tech funding rounds. All of these funding rounds are available on the Dealroom platform. And here we just want to sort of showcase.
So this is just a couple of words about Iron Wolf. So we are a VC fund dedicated to deep tech and AI startup founders in the Baltics. So we are the first fund in the Baltics that have built truly pan-Baltic portfolio. So, large part of our investments are in Estonia, Latvia, not only Lithuania. And in this, our first fund, AI and DeepTech had, very, very big focus. So in this area, we have made 12 investments out of 22. And what's also very positive that, large part of those deep tech and AI investments, they have reached Series A. So they are really showing good performance. And we're raising the fund of 70 million that will be launched next year. So we'll be happy, to invest in promising investments starting from next year.
Awesome. So thank you, Žygimantas and Alex, for bringing up the deal room report. We've been waiting for something like this in our ecosystem for a while, so it's awesome that you've hit this milestone and delivered it to all of us. And the reason we wanted to show you these numbers and speculate with these numbers is because, as you have guessed, we are selling deep tech to you as an important asset subclass that we think has a lot of potential for the region. And that's why we have two other people here on the panel with me. And to just lead into that conversation, one number that really stood out from the report that you guys prepared to me is that the Baltics demonstrated a 4.2x growth in deep tech over the past 5 years. In comparison, the European average is 3.6 and the US average is 4x. So we're actually performing better in terms of the growth of the deep tech ecosystem than some of our most important and strong frenemies, if I can say. And Sandra, 2 years ago, you started thinking about launching a deep tech fund. You've sensed this potential of deep tech in the air. What are the origins of the Baltic Sandbox Ventures and how did it all come together?
Yeah, because everything else would have been too easy, right? You need to go to the hard way.
One of the hard quests.
Yeah. Well, actually, if you take the helicopter view at our ecosystem, and not just like startup ecosystem, if you take the helicopter view on the country level, deep tech is not just startups. Deep tech is not about putting screens on databases and trying to pretend that you're saving the world and saving lives and so on. Deep tech is a huge part of the economy, first of all, because we are talking money, we're talking new technologies, where the patents and the origin of the technology stays in the country. When we are talking about deep tech, we're talking about the defensibility of our country. And with the war at our border, we pretty much understood, I think, like 2 years ago, that we weren't ready. No one actually expected this, right? And if we're dependent on the technologies that are sold to us by other countries, where is our independence in the political sense? And where is what happens if we have a war here? How can we defend ourselves? So, and deep tech is actually much more. Deep tech is about healthcare. Deep tech is about education. So it's not just money. It's not just defense. It's transforming the whole country. It's transforming the economics, and at the end of the day, it's transforming society. But early stage, right? You have to start somewhere. I was looking at the ecosystem, and if we want other funds, to unlock the deep tech potential, and their later stage funds, we need to build the grassroots. And no one wants to do this. I mean, it's not that we decided to be heroes and volunteered, but really, like very early stage deep tech startups. When I talked to other investors, my friends from US and Israel, they said like, what? No, don't go there. Otherwise you won't have, your life anymore and nothing else. So yeah, so this is how it started, because easy is too easy.
Easy is too easy. So what I like about Sandra's point is that if you look at the history of Silicon Valley and how Stanford graduates came back to their dean to thank the dean for bringing Hewlett and Packard together, and they donated a bunch of money to Stanford to mentor other young electricians, how Fairchild Semiconductors moved east to west, and how NASA started buying some of the first contracts for semiconductors, which really gave the boost to the ecosystem there, and venture capital followed to support those young engineers. It's very deep techy. And in one way, you could argue that the growth of Silicon Valley was incentivized by Soviets launching Sputnik into space, and the US going on this massive innovation shift to try to catch up and put the man on the moon first. And the reason I'm highlighting space is obviously because I want to talk to Vytenis, who to this day is one of the few founders in Lithuania who actually managed to deliver us a DeepTech exit. So Vytenis, how did the miracle happen?
Look, it's a very long story. Maybe you have other question.
Yes. What should others follow and do to follow your example?
In fact, it's a very long story. So once I get a bit, too much in details, please stop me. In general, entire thing, nanoavionics, was totally passion-driven. I mean, we started the business just because we didn't know how hard it will be. I mean, if I knew by then, it's like around 2009, right? I would never go into this sector in Lithuania or elsewhere. We were students. We did some students-related CubeSat small satellite programs. We were behind the first Lithuanian CubeSat mission, which was called Lithuanica Sat-1. And it was really intense period, like 3 years of intense work, no families, anything. And suddenly it's over. And what's next? We came in a very interesting situation where, I think all of you know that, let's say, emptiness, right? Once you finish something. So in 2014, Agency of Innovation, Science and Technology offered a grant to commercialize R&D. And that was, I would say, initial impulse. I mean, of course, the right staff, right, the right colleagues, we grasped this opportunity, and of course we applied. We got a tiny grant of 21,000 euros by then, but that gave us a huge precedent to push forward. So that's how it began in general.
And when venture capital come in, and how did guys like us help guys like you, if in any ways?
That was a very interesting story. In general, myself and my colleague Linas, who were 2 of 5 initial co-founders, we were a little bit, more business-driven. So Linas is a financial guy and business guy. I was something, in between, a manager with engineering background. So I could, let's say, integrate those 2 worlds, business and engineering, because they always compete, which is better, which is smarter. So I was in between. And Linas found an opportunity. By then it was Practica Capital and Donatas in front of these guys, and Anatolius. In general, we proposed the idea that we're going to create multi-million business, space-related business in Lithuania. And in general, out of those, I don't know, tens or dozens of opportunities we had, they were not laughing of us. So, that was the beginning. And actually, thanks to them, they believed us, actually. So investment came in early 2015. I think it's official. It was roughly, rather standard 200K something of investment. By then it was a huge money. We were very lean. We were very effective because we were passion driven. We used that money only for really crucial things like, hardware, prototyping, etc. And yeah, that was the very, very beginning, the most important impulse in our life.
Awesome. So let's stop here a little bit with the nano story, and let me turn my attention to Alex. So Alex, you sit in Amsterdam, you work with Dealroom, you look at a lot of data happening in Europe, and all of a sudden you look at this weird country, Lithuania, with a space tech exit. We must seem crazy to you. But on a serious note, how does the world look at the Lithuanian and Baltic deep tech, and what do you guys think about us?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ethereum, just to give a little bit of context, it's a data platform for startup information in terms of funding rounds, tracking startups. My role within Ethereum is looking at startup ecosystems, such as the Baltics, like we've done for this report, and DeepTech, like we've done for this report, all across the continent, be it on a city, region, state, country, continent level. But whenever we're looking at the state of deep tech in the Baltics, it's not necessarily so much of a surprise that there are success stories, there is funding going into these startups because, quite frankly, the governments and the infrastructure here is making it very easy to do so. You know, there's a lot of accelerators, a lot of incubators, a lot of local investors are willing to invest and take chances on deep tech opportunities. Which is something that's, in terms of how international investors and ourselves looking at these startup ecosystems look at the Baltics, they do perform very well, and they're very well known for success stories such as Bolt, such as Skype. So they're not an unknown player necessarily in the European startup ecosystem, and deep tech, as we showcased in the report, and as you mentioned in terms of the growth rate of deep tech in the last 5 years, the Baltics is outpacing at the growth rates of other sort of larger European regions, which we see is, you know, complements your question in terms of, you know, is it a surprise that there are funding rounds going into deep tech? And frankly, that it's not, because the infrastructure and everything else is building for that to be the case.
Awesome. So I'd like to put another sort of like selling point to our audience in here is that the world is recognizing the power of the Baltic deep tech, and we should continue pushing and pressing the pedal to the metal on, I think, in this asset subclass. And now let me turn my attention to Žygimanta. So Žygimanta, you've delivered the Fund 1, awesome vintage. We've seen some real photonics companies, laser companies, robotics, AI. You understand deep tech. And now you're raising Fund 2 on deep tech and AI.
Yes.
The Lithuanian idiom, lipti ant to paties grėblio. Why would you step on the same rake? Why would you do something that's so complex? Again, where does the mission come from?
Yeah, I think, you know, there are a couple of reasons. You know, first of all, you know, deep tech and successful deep tech, it relies on, you know, cutting-edge technology as competitive advantage, right? And if you make a very good product, and of course, you know, making this product takes much longer, you know, compared to some SaaS company. It can take 3 years, even more than that, to go to industrial grade product. But once you do it, and most of the time, you know, this product, it solves a really, really big problem for society. So it has huge value for society. And once we have this product, so, you know, going to the market, it is much easier. And you do not have, you know, to spend lots of money on marketing, right? That you would do in some other cases, right? Like marketplaces or some SaaS companies. I think this is one thing. Another thing that in our portfolio, we see that out of those 22 investments that we made, so deep tech and AI, but, you know, those startups that use AI as a core, right? They perform much better compared to the rest. So I think, you know, we already have a track record that it's not only interesting, you know, to invest into such startups, but they also, you know, are delivering results. And at the moment, we have 3 startups that have completed Series A, and all of those are either deep tech or AI. And we'll see that another 3 to 5 companies would be completing, you know, Series A in the coming 2 years. And most of them, again, would be deep tech and AI.
Awesome. So let me just reveal the sort of like the 5th screen and tell you about the conversation Žygis and I had backstage. And we're trying to count the deep tech exits in the Baltics. And we thought, okay, Fermentas, Thermo Fisher, okay, Milgram Robotics, obviously Nano Avionics, and we're like Skype. So I think that if you go back to Skype, Skype was deep tech, is deep tech, right? And it gave a massive boost to the Baltics. but we always have this challenge of when we as the early stage investors sort of like pick up a lot of work, punch above our weight, try to push our babies out into the world, we need foreign investors to pick it up. And so another backstage question I've asked Alex to prepare for is to talk to us a little bit about the division between the local, regional investors picking up the brunt of the weight versus international investors. What's the situation today? Who is building or financing DeepTech in the Baltics?
Yeah, that's a great question. So looking specifically at DeepTech, the deal room tracks over the last decade, over 500 funding rounds have gone into deep tech startups in the Baltics, HQ'd, or have since founded in the Baltics and since moved on. And what we see is that in the early stages, it is true that 2/3 of these funding rounds of the 500 are coming from local, domestic, or European investors. And about a third proportion is coming from the likes of the US, Asia, and other parts of the world. This is a similar trend that we see in other sort of segments, other industries and verticals, not only in the Baltics, but also across European ecosystems. European ecosystems, especially when it gets to a larger stage or a later stage of funding, there is a requirement or there is more of a need for funding to come from external sources. So it's not necessarily just a deep tech issue in the Baltics. Though we do notice the difference between funding rounds going into Baltic startups and funding rounds going into deep tech Baltic startups, that there is more of a support from local and domestic sources. This can be due to the nature of deep tech, as you were mentioning, the fact that it's not necessarily just a SaaS model or something that's very easy for most investors to understand. There is an element of risk. There is an element of understanding the technologies or the concept of the startup, which is sometimes harder to grasp with different startups there. So that's what we would sort of attribute in terms of the reasoning for the differences. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a Baltics or a deep tech related issue. It's continent level wide. But I think the Baltics, from the startup founders creating innovative technologies and the governments putting the infrastructure for that to happen and seeing that growth rate, is showing that, I think in time, with a matter of patience and explaining these concepts, is that the later stage larger investors from foreign sources will eventually come into play.
But if you had to put a number on it, is it like 40-60, 50-50? How does the distribution?
Yeah, about 2/3 is
okay.
coming from domestic and sort of European local investors, and then the remaining third is coming from the US, Asia, China, and other sort of undisclosed sources.
Awesome, thank you.
I think you need to distinguish between early stage and growth stage, because I think composition would be totally different. Like an early stage would be like more local, growth European, and breakthrough would be European, and growth would also involve large US funds.
Of course, yes, and that is sort of the theme that's seen across all startups, and particularly in deep tech. That's in most European startup ecosystems, it is a local and domestic and nearby investors who invest into different startups, and then once they've got enough recognition, enough funding, other sort of larger investors will come in to provide that sort of last step for success.
Sandra, you work a lot with international investors. Obviously, even at the acceleration incubation stage, you're already putting people in touch with people abroad. What do you think is the secret or the recipe for attracting more international investors to Lithuania to come in at earlier stages, or potentially at picking up where we start and then building it later? What's the recipe?
Well, first of all, it's the opportunity, right? Because we are building this before we actually started, growing this grassroots, very early stage startups and everything. All the investors I talked to, for example, from US, they were looking at Baltics. Yeah, you probably have some tech there, probably not, probably we are not interested, and so on and so forth. When I started speaking about like 60 early stage startups in Baltics, investors became really interested. They're like, oh, 60. So some of them will get some further rounds from the funds. It means that some of them are going to grow. It means there is an investment opportunity for us. Because those guys whose investment starts from 5 million, it doesn't make sense for them to kind of come and look at the startup whose valuation is 3 million. or something like this. So yeah, so first of all, the growing size of the opportunity in terms of the headcounts, because those startups who are going to fail their products, and some startups are going to definitely be there, they're scientists. They probably won't stop. They'll join the team of other founders. They'll do something. So the more you invest in the grassroots, the better ecosystem you have at the end of the day. And additionally to this, it just needs time. Because now how the market looks like, if we're talking, for example, dual tech, I would ask you 5 years ago about dual tech, you would tell me what? That there are governmental agencies, big companies that are working with the government, and there is no place for a startup there for two reasons. No one would allow the startup to do such things, not to mention regulations and everything. And secondly, no one will invest. They won't get money. What are we looking at now? You saw the list of the dual tech startups that is impressing, and it's getting more and more impressive each day. And investors in Europe and US saw a huge opportunity and started kind of investing money in it. So time and the size of opportunity.
So let's put the deadline. 5 years for another exit?
Probably,
All right.
very likely.
So we'll try to deliver it to you in 5 years' time. Vitanis, you've dealt with a lot of foreign investors. Can you tell us about your dealings with them? What attracted their interest in DeepTech made by you in Lithuania? And how did the exit happen? And what are the lessons to learn for all of us from your exit?
So we had quite a few of the investments rounds. So starting with local, of course, early stage, and that investment was, of course, driven by maybe other factors why those investors decided to invest. I mean, Practica Capital. Of course, they should have seen a lot of risk in us, of course, but somehow, yeah, they granted the investment. Second round happened after 3-4 years into the business. We started to look for the exposure to US market. Doing a deep tech, whether it's civil application or defense application or dual purpose, it's quite hard to enter the US market. And we started to look how we can do it. Because in general, in deep tech industry, half of the world is within United States. The rest is elsewhere. Middle East, maybe Africa, maybe South America, maybe Australia, a little bit, in Europe. So we felt that it's crucial to enter that US market, and we started to look what we could do there. And we came up with a few contacts who in general needed, that investor, AST and Science, they needed to have a local capabilities of manufacturing hardware, firmware, and software. Since we were in the right stage, right, not too expensive, not too big, not too small, they decided to invest. And in general, of course, the requirement was quite tough. They wanted to have a control interest, but in general, all of the other benefits they could and they provided were really making building gain for the company. So that was a second round, right? The last round, which happened last year, we in general sold the control interest and quite a significant part of the smaller shareholders to a huge defense group, Kongsberg, which is in general a corporation, 10,000 people plus, defense stuff, etc. Because we felt that it's time for some kind of consolidation of our business, and in general there is a trend in the space market in this period of time of the consolidation. So in general, the market is relatively young, and we can still see some things we've seen within aviation industry, right? 100 years ago, where airliner manufacturer opened their own airlines, or vice versa. Airlines are building their own airliners. So we believe in that consolidation, and we felt that it's time to join the forces with the big brother. So we started to look for the big brother by the beginning of 2022. And actually, the process was quite quick. And within a half a year, we became a part of the huge corporation, which is in fact also supplying an air defense systems. For example, for Lithuania, the same air defense systems as shielding Washington, D.C. So in general,
Nice.
yeah, we joined the huge defense group, and in general, entire space business, because of Ukraine, is turning towards defense.
So a general warning to everybody in the hall, we're about 10 minutes away from your lunch, so give us 10 more minutes, but we will switch our focus into helping founders now. So let's dedicate this last part of the panel on tips and tricks for a few people in the audience who don't want to build a marketplace or a SaaS and want to go into a garage or into a lab and deliver, deep tech. And one of the things that we touched upon today is that deep tech is different because it's mission driven, because it's geopolitical sometimes, and because it adds sort of like moats or even competitive advantage to nations, right? And it's all startuppers, founders, engineers who are delivering it. So whoever wants to pick it up, tips and tricks for young engineers and young startuppers who want to build deep tech. How can they start? Where should they go? What questions do they need to ask? Any tips?
I think that the first advice would be that if they want to build true deep tech or AI company, they need to think big. They need to have global ambition, and once they develop, they also need to think that if they need some talent, they need to think about the global world and source it from anywhere in the world. Right, and if to talk about fundraising, I think at the beginning it would more depend on local capital, but even from the very beginning they need to think what they need to achieve in order to be interesting for large European or even US investors in 2 to 3 years' time, and to have a very, very good plan for that.
So ambition and good fundraising early on. Sandra, what are your tips?
Well, you saw our pipeline, right? Like in each and every team, we have a scientist or someone who is like close to science or something. And in some teams, we don't have like even a proper business people, because scientists think, okay, so first we will develop the product, we'll do all the R&D, we'll do all the stuff, and we'll test it, and we'll say that it's going to work 100%. And after this, we'll hire some business developer, and probably this business developer is going to sell our product to someone. It doesn't work like this. So I'm not the type of fund that will tell you that you have to go and sell the half-baked products, because that's the second part of the advice, basically, but we'll go there. But as a scientist, you have to think from the very, very beginning about the commercial application, about the cross-vertical, cross-dimensional commercial application, in how your product can kind of change the industry where you're building this technology or product or something. That's the first thing, because the more changes you can bring, the more other technologies are dependent on your technology, the more chances you are going to be a unicorn. And the second thing is find the right investor. I've seen several deep tech startups that were killed by the wrong funds, let's put it like this. Because deep tech startups need some period for R&D. Deep tech startups need some period for some sort of the protection, be it patents, trade secrets, something. At the end of the day, if the investor is a generalist, investors come into the deep tech startups, it says like, yeah, you're doing good technology, here is some money, go sell. And then the whole team of the startup is going on the journey to trying to sell this technology to someone on the market. And technology is not ready yet. At some point, they bring the LOIs to the investor, and investor is happy, like, oh, good guys, you kind of brought me some LOIs and so on. And then what happens? They run out of money. And they come back to investor and they say like, look, we need kind of some money to invest in this technology, otherwise we don't have the product. And investors said like, where did you spend the money? You don't need the money to invest in technology. You need to go and sell. And then, And then the startup is dead, the investor is unhappy, so choose the right investor. If investor says, I'm going to invest money in you, but my money should go into sales or into marketing, not into R&D, just run.
Actually may be able to build specifically on that last point. Just again, coming from Dealroom, the data provider for startups, funding rounds, we also have information on thousands of investors across the Baltics, Europe, the world, etc. And I think it's a very clear point that you're making, the fact that it's core that you find someone who is alongside with your mission and understands what you're aiming to do. And on the platform, you're able to review and filter down by the location of the investor, of their experience, how much they invested to, the type of funding round or the size of the fund that they have. And with this, you should be able to get a little bit of a better understanding in terms of the profile and the information of the investors that you want to look into, and then see what would be the best match for what your mission is as a deep tech startup or as AI related or enabled startup, and finding the best investor profile for yourself.
If you'll allow me a quick tip and trick from my end. So when these two people in the audience were building DeepTech, right? When you go on Dealroom and find the investors you want to talk to, ask for a warm introduction. You have 5 beautiful people on stage who can help you with those introductions, but ask for the introduction when you're ready. And when you know, you can defend your thesis of DeepTech. But we will help you, because the point of this panel is to actually show you that the ecosystem has reached a point where we're willing to throw a lot of resources and support to support young deep tech founders to build global businesses. And with this in mind, I like asking this question, so Tanya will ask you this question. Hypothetically, if you were to do it all again and to build a deep tech company with a successful exit 10 years ago, what would you tell yourself? What would you do differently? How would you start?
I would say I would tell to myself 3 things. First thing, don't do it.
I love it.
Don't go there. But if you are there already, there is no way back. I mean, full dedication, 100%, 100% requirements and expectations from your team members. If you see underperformance, act quick. Get rid of them. I mean, you have to be polite, you have to be honest, but if someone is underperforming, say goodbye right away. Second thing, business focus. You don't do things, engineering, software, firmware, just because it's cool. If you want to do cool things, you go to the university, you do your PhD, whatever, you read the articles, I don't know, somewhere in the internet, right? But everything is business driven. You ask yourself what value you create, what the market need. You always ask this question. Third thing, you get things done, right?
It's done.
It. No matter what, you get things done. There is no excuses, there is no exception. Otherwise, the reality, the harsh reality of the world will blow you away. I mean, you are dead. That's it. 3 things.
Awesome. And I'm a part-time entrepreneur myself, in addition to Baltic Sandbox. And one thing I tell other founders is also don't do a startup. It's a sexy asset class. A lot of people look at TV shows and think that it's awesome, but you don't understand that you tie a decade of your life to one thing that you always go to sleep with, and you can't get it out of your head, right? And no matter whether it's going well or bad, you have to be mentally ready for that decade and for a journey. So don't do it is a great advice, I think. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm always telling this to the founders. So as an investor, like, please don't do the startup. And also there is the success bias, you know, so you read all this like media and everything, and they write about the successful startups. And you start feeling that all those startups around you are successful, just because no one knows about the startups that are dead. That is 99% of the startups probably. So yeah, so if you have an opportunity not to be a startup founder, don't be a startup founder. You will have a nice life.
But I always add the second part. So don't do a startup, and particularly don't do a deep tech startup unless you absolutely have to. And that's where the mission comes in, and that's what changes the game for a lot of deep tech entrepreneurs. And we're about to get kicked off stage by Startup Fair personnel who are screaming at the screen here with 27 seconds left. So I'll quickly sum up what happened here today. So Žygimantas and Alex showed us some really positive numbers about the strength and maturity of deep tech ecosystem in the Baltics. We're hoping to sell these numbers to more deep tech founders and to more international investors to come and co-invest with us. Vytenis told you about a perfect case of building and exiting a deep tech company in space in an ambitious domain. It's possible, it's been done. He's a role model. Ask for his guidance if you're a young founder. And Sandra has indicated all the possible benefits that the Baltic Sandbox Incubation Acceleration can offer for you at the very early stage. So, in conclusion, deep tech in the Baltics looks good. We're demonstrating leadership, and we can bring up an awesome power geopolitically and technologically if we all focus and come together as a deep tech ecosystem and unlock a 400 million opportunity over the next decade. Thank you all. You've been wonderful. Thank you for the panel.
Thank you.